Property prices in the Netherlands have been shooting upwards over the last few years, and according to Statistics Netherlands, 2021 saw the highest price rise ever, with an increase nationally of over 15%. It was also the 8th consecutive year of growth. Now, in Amsterdam, house prices for existing property rose by 11.5% to average nearly €570,000. In Rotterdam, existing homes rose by over 18% to average 364,000, and in The Hague, existing homes rose by nearly 16% to average €412,000. And all indicators show that price rises are continuing in 2022. But the question is, will prices continue to rise, and should you invest in the Netherlands? Now, in this video, I will give you arguments for and against investing in the Netherlands real estate market, and I'll give you my conclusion at the end. So let's look at the arguments for investing in real estate in the Netherlands. Number one, the Netherlands is one of the most densely populated countries in Europe. Only Malta has a higher population density. Please note, I am excluding places like Monaco, San Marino, Vatican City, and Gibraltar. But given the high population density, property prices should continue to grow. Number two, I want to talk about population growth. So the population of the Netherlands is expected to grow from 17.2 million in 2022 to 17.5 million in 2035. So again, this will ensure that demand will stay strong in the housing market here. And if we look at specific cities, Amsterdam's population will grow from 1.17 million in 2022 to 1.24 million in 2035. Now, for Rotterdam, it will go from 1,015,000 to 1,064,000, and for The Hague, the population will increase from 709,000 again in 2022 to 755,000 in 2035. So all these figures, which are taken from macro trends, do indicate that property prices should continue to rise. Number three, there is a supply shortage of property in the Netherlands. So the housing industry in the Netherlands is suffering labour and material shortages, and hence prices are likely to continue to go up in the short to medium term, as not enough homes are being built. Number four, I want to talk about the steady GDP growth. So if we take the 5-year period 2015 to 2019, GDP growth ranged from 1.8% to 2.9%. Now, I know this is not spectacular, but for a very well developed country, it's not too bad either. In 2020, GDP fell by 3.8% due to the pandemic, but it recovered all of this and more when it rose by 5% in 2021. So quite a decent performance here for a very mature country. Number five, I want to talk about the quite low total government debt to GDP. Now, the total government debt to GDP stands at around 52%, which is much lower than most Western European countries and the US. So we're talking about the UK, US, France, Spain, and Italy, who all have debt levels, government debt levels to GDP of over 100%, and in the Netherlands it's only 52%. And it's quite impressive because in 2014 it was actually 70%. So it's gone down from 70% in 2014 to 52%, and this is pretty good as well, given that we've had a pandemic in 2020 and a bit of 21 as well, and governments have had to borrow a lot. So I think this is quite impressive. Now, reason number six, the Netherlands has very low unemployment at just over 3%, and this is much lower than the EU average, as is youth unemployment, which stands at around 7%. Number seven, the Netherlands has one of the highest GDP per capita in Europe, which is roughly 20% higher than both France and the UK. So again, the Netherlands is a very wealthy country. Number 8, I want to talk about the Netherlands being a really quite risk-free country to invest in, simply because it is in the EU, it is in the Euro, and it is in NATO as well. Now, I know some people are against these organizations that do watch this channel, but I think in general it does make the Netherlands a safer country. Number 9, I want to talk about the Netherlands as a very, very investable country. So, first of all, it has low buy-sell costs when buying property. It ranks amongst the world's most competitive economies, has great infrastructure, and it is not uncommon for people in the Netherlands to speak 3 or more languages, 3 or 4 foreign languages, which is mighty impressive. And there are also no restrictions on foreign buyers who want to purchase property in the Netherlands. So that's another good reason to invest in this country. And number 10, I want to talk briefly about Brexit. So the Netherlands is benefiting a little bit from the UK leaving the European Union and the single market, with a few thousand new jobs which have been created by financial firms that have relocated some of their operations in the Netherlands, and we're talking mainly about the regulation and administration sectors, and you never know, they might benefit even more in the future. However, there are quite significant disadvantages when it comes to investing in the Netherlands, and it's mainly the prices. The prices are very high, in particular in Amsterdam, where property on average has reached 570,000 euros for existing homes, and that's extremely high. And as prices have been rising a lot over the last few years, if you buy now, you are definitely not buying at the bottom. You are buying potentially fairly near the top, although I think this boom has a bit more to go. Number 2, I want to talk about the lowish rental yields, specifically in Amsterdam, where you're likely to get less than 4% gross, which isn't great, but it is better than both Paris and London. However, I want to be fair, there are better yields in both The Hague and Rotterdam. Here you can get between 5 and 6% gross, and that's better than Amsterdam. And really for Western European cities, that's not too bad. Number 3, and I think this is another big problem of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is one of the most pro-tenant countries in the world, and it is very hard to evict a tenant. In many cases, you can only reclaim your property if you specifically need to live in it. For example, if you've gone through a divorce, or if your tenant causes a lot of nuisance in the property. And even if you try to sell your property and get rid of the tenant before doing that, if you've got a contract in place, you'll have to sell your property with the tenant in it, and this potentially could lower the price at which you could sell the property. Number 4, I want to briefly talk about Airbnb. So in general, the Airbnb market here is quite limited. In effect, it is actually banned in The Hague and limited in Amsterdam, so I don't think you'd be buying property in the Netherlands for Airbnb purposes, and you never know, these measures might get even worse in the future. So from a renting point of view, the Netherlands is not very good. And number 5, I want to talk about, unfortunately, quite high taxation. Now, in the Netherlands, you're not actually taxed for capital gains or actual rent. Instead, the Dutch tax office assumes that you enjoy a yield of up to 5.53% over your total asset value, irrespective if any actual gains, the actual gains are actually higher or lower than the presumed yield, which I must admit I find particularly peculiar. And then what they do with this fictitious number, they tax it at 31%, which again is not very low. Now for year 2022, irrespective of the actual yield obtained on your assets for property values between 50,650 and 962,342 euros. The assumed yield on your property will be 4.37%, and anything above this is assumed that you'll get a yield of 5.53%. So it is peculiar because you actually might be getting less than this, or hopefully you'll get more. For example, in The Hague or Rotterdam, you might actually benefit, but I think in Amsterdam you're probably going to lose with the way they actually tax. So I do find this very, very, very peculiar, and I haven't seen this in other countries, not so far anyway. So taxation, as I've said, is another reason for not investing. So what's the conclusion? Is the Netherlands an investment opportunity? I'm afraid the answer has to be no. Although I do think prices will go up a bit more in the future, albeit at a slower rate, and adjusted for inflation, I'm not sure if the property prices will beat inflation. Probably they will, but they may beat it by 1% or so. So it is definitely not an opportunity for the investors. Perhaps for a wealthy individual, it could be a place just to park your money, hopefully get some rent or growth which will keep you above inflation, but otherwise this is not a real estate opportunity. Anyway, thanks ever so much for watching, and I shall see you very soon on the next video.